Lately I've been thinking about this life and how it brought me here. Staring at this man in the mirror, I see him often. He'll wipe my tears. Only if you knew what I was going through. Only if you walked it in my shoes. Certain things don't like to talk about, but I'll always remember. The chaos in my mind turned my heart out in November. I'm surrounded by too many doors, not sure which way I entered. But I'm rocking with my loved ones, let you know that front and center. Found out my skin's tough as leather, I can storm through any weather. Addiction was the hardest battle I ever endeavored. It takes a lot of effort to apply all of this pressure. Being higher than
Welcome to the Messages Hope podcast. My name is Adam.
My name is Mike, and today we have Tina J in here with us on the podcast. Hi, Tina.
Hi, how you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Good.
So I've known Tina for about a long time, at least almost 11 years, right?
Yes.
And we'll talk about that if we don't talk about that, but I mainly know Tina from recovery. Maybe we weren't always in the same circles, but we hung out with similar people, and she's always been a rock star in recovery, always very open and vibrant with her message. And so, yeah, so I'm excited for today.
Me too. I haven't known you that long, but I've heard you share a couple times, and you don't hold anything back at all.
Yeah.
That's me.
All right. So, Tina, what was it like for you growing up?
So I was born and raised in Fontana.
Okay.
And, I had a
Fontana,
mom,
California, right?
Fontana, California, yes. And like I had a mom and dad that were amazing. You know, they loved each other a lot, and we never had drugs or alcohol in our house. Like both of my grandparents, both my grandpas were alcoholics, and so my parents kind of swore that off. And I had a sister, and I was just from a really good background. You know what I mean? My mom and dad like loved each other a lot, and they were really good, supportive parents.
All right. Perfect. So what was it like? Like was there like any kind of like bad behaviors growing up?
So since I've worked the steps, right, like I can recognize that that I was an addict way before I ever knew it, right? Like when I played softball, I played every league of softball, right? When I worked out as much as I could. You know,
Right.
Everything I did was in excess. I think for me, like looking back, my bad behavior probably started in fourth grade.
Okay.
I had met a girl from Romania.
Okay.
And her parents were big partiers. And the first time that I ever drank, I was in fifth grade, 10 years old.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. And what was that experience like for you?
It was good for me. So their parents were going to party, right? And so they bought us a big bottle of vodka. And I don't know how it happened, or I remember her making a drink, and I grabbed the bottle. And from the moment I started drinking, like I never wanted a drink to be fun. Like I wanted to drink to get fucked up.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I was pretty much a regular drinker, like as much as I could on the weekends at that age, right? Her brother was an older guy, and so he would take us to house parties, and drinking was my thing. I liked it, and it was just always excess for me.
Okay.
I was always blacking out. I was always the one they had to pull out of the party, right? I was just always that one.
At that point, we're like, because you're young, right?
10 years old.
10 years old. So like,
Yeah.
So there's like nobody around you that is like concerned about anything that was going on.
No. I stayed away from my parents' house,
That
right?
is
Like they didn't
horrible.
know. I came home drunk one time, and my dad, like, my mom was she was the dictator, right? And my dad was not the dictator. He was always just the one that tried to protect me, right? And so I came home one day. They knew I was somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. And as he goes to pull me in the house, like he can smell the alcohol on me, and immediately puts me away from my mom, right? Because he knows if she finds out that there's going to be hell to pay, right? And so that cycle just kept going through high school, and I think for me, right, all my friends were using drugs.
Right.
But I wasn't. I was just drinking. And it was so accepted that it just never, ever, ever felt like a problem to me. Right. You know what I mean? Never. And, yeah.
What kind of drugs were your friends doing in high school?
Everybody was smoking weed, right?
Yeah.
I had a couple girlfriends that their family were selling drugs, so there was a lot of meth and coke going on. I just never felt like I needed it, right? Alcohol was my niche, and I never wanted to fuck up what I had with alcohol, right? Because from the moment I put it in me, I loved the way I felt, right? That little girl that always felt not good enough. And that didn't have anything to do with my parents, right? That's just who I was. That's how I was born. The minute I put alcohol in me, I felt so good about who I was, you know? And so I never felt like I needed a drug. That was my drug. Like, and I never drank out of a cup. I was always a bottle girl. I always had the bottle, right? So
Were you an only child?
I have a sister that's 4 years younger than me.
Okay. Did she ever get into any of that?
No.
No?
No, she was straight A student. She was the perfect child. Yeah.
So when did it start taking off into the...
So I got married when I was 20. I had my son, my first son when I had my son when I was 22. And after I had him, that was my parents' first grandchild, right? So they wanted him every weekend. And so that was our time to go out and party, right? And so my poor ex-husband, right? Like, he never really got an opportunity to party because I was such a fucking handful, you know? I would walk into a bar, I was drinking too much, I was on top of the bar, I was just the one, right? So he was having to drag me out, and then I had my daughter at 28, right? I would say in terms of alcoholism, right? Like, I drank to black out. Right? Did I consume alcohol every day? Not at that point in my life, right? But I was a drinker that when I drank, I caused a lot of wreckage, right? I'm trying to fight people. It was just really toxic. And
I feel like that's like a big misconception about addiction, right? Is it like people like, well, I don't drink every day, like I binge drink, or like I'm indifferent, or I'm not the same as you. And the truth is, like how much you consume or how often you're consuming something has nothing to do with whether you're an addict or an alcoholic, right? It has to do with, like, are you drinking and your life's becoming unmanageable? And when you know that I shouldn't be doing this, because like a normal person, like if they're smoking weed to the point where like now I'm not getting no schoolwork done, I'm not, you know, they're gonna be like, you know what, I need to put the weed down for a little, for you know, and so I could focus on myself, right? Where the addict's like, no, it's not the weed. Like for me, right?
Yeah, 100%.
I thought it was everything else. I thought it was my neighborhood. I thought it was my friends. I thought it was the girl I was with, right? And then you like take all those things away from me, and it was hard for me to admit that maybe it's the drugs.
Drug, right?
You know what
100%.
I'm saying? Yeah.
And I think the moments of clarity, right, is when I look back at my life, right, missing my kids' baseball games or football games because I'm just too fucked up to get there, right, or wanting to go, and him like, Mom, you just need to stay at home, right, like, let's just keep you here. At that point, I wasn't missing work. Like, I was really devoted to my job. But I was not a very good employee, right? Because I would be so fucked up Sunday night that I was going to work Monday drunk, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, like I'm coming down still, right? I've still got the hangover, and then by Friday it's back on again, right? So I didn't have to drink every day for my life to be unmanageable. Like I lost friendships as a result, right? I lost. I just lost a lot of things in my life at that point that I didn't feel I was doing too bad, right? Because I hadn't hit the hard stuff yet. So I had my daughter at 28, and at 30 years old, we had bought this big, beautiful house, and I felt like we were living our best life, and the marriage ended from some indiscretions, right? So that was my son was 7 and my daughter was 2. And so in the blink of an eye, right? Like, I lost my best friend, I lost my husband, we had to sell the house, and I lost my kids. And I dove into the bottle, right? I wasn't brave enough to kill myself, but I just wanted to die on a regular basis. And like, at this point, I'm working construction. Right, I'm on a job site, so I would go party.
Wait a don't move past that. Okay. What were you doing at the construction site?
So I worked for a new home builder, and I was doing like the new home walks, right? The new house walks. So when somebody would buy it, but I was doing a lot of repairs too, right? Like if there was things that needed to be fixed or whatever, I could fix them. And so like I would go party, and I would go sleep in my trailer, because then I would make it to work the next day, right? And so I'm 30 years old. I'd smoked marijuana, I would say maybe 4 times in my life. Was not my thing. I always got butt naked and put boas on me and ran around wherever I was. It was not a good look for me. And so my friends feel like at this point I need to start dating, right? And And so my girlfriend calls me and says, I have this guy I want to hook you up with. He's so amazing. Right now, at this point in my life, right, like I lived behind a white picket fence. You know what I mean? Like the very worst thing I ever did in my life was I got a speeding ticket for 86 miles an hour and I felt like I was going to prison, right? So she said, I want you to meet this dude. I just want you to be open-minded, right? And he comes to pick me up, and he has this really big, badass, like suburban truck thing, and like I get into his truck, I'm already fucked up, right? I get in his truck, I go to cross my legs like a lady, and I hit something under his dash, and it was like a compartment that a gun, like it was a place where he hit a gun, and immediately I thought, oh, this is gonna be fun, right? I didn't know anything about it. At dinner that night, I realized that he was a very good salesman, but he sold drugs. Yeah. And but he had like told me, you know, my dad died of meth, so I don't fuck around with that ever, right? I do a little bit of cocaine, I do a lot of weed, and I do some pills here and there, right? And I'm like, that's fine, I just drink, right? So it's just a matter of time before I end up at a party with him and all of his friends, and they're like, dude, you got to do blow with us, right? And so they were doing cocaine and ecstasy. I did a little cocaine. I did a little ecstasy. I ended up in the bathroom trying to saw my arm off, right? Wait.
And so, literally try to saw it off.
Yeah, literally.
You want to walk us through that a little bit?
So I remember going into the bathroom and having this really heavy sense of wanting to inflict pain on people. Well, I didn't want to make a scene, right? I'm just meeting a lot of his friends for the first time. So I'm like, I'm just going to just try to cut on my arm a little bit, right? I want to, and it was a bloody scene. His friends come in. They're like, what the fuck? This bitch is crazy, right? We can't give her drugs. And so I was like, you know what? It was the ecstasy. I'm going to just opt out of that, right? Yeah. And, but when I took the ecstasy away, like cocaine, I would jaw jack so bad, like I would try to bite my ear off. Yeah. And so I couldn't go in public with that, right? So it was just a bust. I was not good on drugs, right? And so I did that. That little period in my life was maybe weeks to a month. And so he says to me, my ex-husband's going to take my kids on vacation. So he's like, please just do this with me one more time while the kids are gone. Let's just get enough Coke. Let's do it for a week. I've now lost my job as a result of alcoholism, right? So we're in this weed farm, living there in this house we're growing weed in this house. We can barely, there's not really living quarters, right? And so I'm like, okay, one more week, but we can't leave, right? People know, like, I look ridiculous, right? And so he calls his guy's on a cruise, right? So he says, call this guy, he'll come over. His name was Chewy. He says, come over, right? And I'm going to tell you that when he got out of the car, right, he had an entire alligator suit on, right? Alligator jacket, pants, boot. I mean, he was just snazzy looking, right? And so he starts cutting it up with him. And at that point, I had never touched drugs, right? Like he had always cut everything up. He had always, at this point, I'm putting drugs in my nose, right? That's what it was. I'm drinking. And so I just want to lay this out for you, right? Like, I had became such an alcoholic that, like, right after I lost my job, right? Like, I was drinking all day, and it was like drinking, passing out, getting up, drinking, passing out, right? My son found me, I don't know how many times naked, right? Like, I'm driving my kids to school with a bottle of whiskey between my legs, right? Like, that's what it had became. And so he's talking to Chewy, and I'm like, hey, let me cut it up, right? Let me just get it going. And for whatever reason, he let me do it. I didn't know what I was up against, right? And so I do these lines, you know, that's what you would do if it's cocaine, and I did it, and it was methamphetamine. And I can only say this, right? When I put my nose in that pile, like people that talk about like, oh, over a period of time, I was addicted. Like the second I put my nose in that, I was in love, right? Stripped down to a bikini, got a toothbrush and scrubbed every fucking baseboard in his house. And he was like, this is going to be a good thing, right? Yeah. And within like 3 days of my kids seeing me, they're like, fuck, Mom, you look so good. You're awake. And so immediately, like,
Wow.
it changed in my head, right? Like, I'm able to make my kids a meal. I hadn't made my kid a meal for years, right? I'm taking him to school and I can leave the whiskey bottle on the counter. And my son was like, Mom, what's going on? Right? Like, I had arrived. Like, I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing it. Like, they knew I was drinking, right? They were just too young to kind of put it together, right? And there it was. There it was.
And I feel like that's what drugs do to you in the beginning, right? They give you like that false confidence.
Yes.
That like we find, like for me, I was always an inward kid, shy, not very talkative. It took a while for me to. It still takes me a while to adjust to people, right? But once I started getting high, right? Maybe not so much the weed, but the drinking, the meth, like all that stuff. It just like opened up doors. I remember this one guy would share, and I related to it. I never told him, but like I bottled everything up, right? And the first time I did meth, bro, I was like, I just told my whole life story, right? Like the good, the bad, the abuse, the neglect, right? And it was like it was like working steps, but just with some dope. You know what I'm saying? Because like I was able to get like all that, and I was like, this is the magic, right? This is where it's at. Like this is what I want to do, you know. But that's a false confidence that it starts off as.
Yes,
right?
100%. Like I was tying ribbons on my kid's school for say no to drugs, right? I was never gonna touch it, and now all of a sudden, I felt like it was saving my life. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like I noticeably, right? My children are now bringing their friends over because mom's not going to be laid on the floor naked, right? Like my son's friends are now hanging out at my house, and so those things that I was missing by being a drunk started to change, and it never occurred to me, maybe you should just stop it all, right? But doing the meth just enabled my alcoholism to the point where ultimately it almost killed me. But so I'm 30, I start that, right? And fast forward all the gunk, right? So there's the boyfriend that never did meth, right? Never. I'm going to tell you that the minute his face came up off that table, I was dealing with a different individual, right? And so abuse was, here I am, right? Like I'm behind a picket fence. Like I have a ticket that was the worst I've had. Now I'm doing meth. I'm drinking, right? I'm somebody to my children again, right? And he's the only person I know that does drugs, right? And so the abuse, I had to take it because he was my ticket to being a good mom.
Wow.
And the abuse that happened was so. It was like shit that happened in movies, right? Like it was abuse that as a human before, I'm like, why didn't that bitch just leave? Right? What is wrong with her? And what I know today, right, is it was let me break you down because I'm going to get you where I want you, and you're going to be paralyzed and not be able to leave. And so I endured that for 8 years. And then it got to the point where I had to get my kids out of there. Right? I had to get my kids out of that because when he would say things like, I'm going to kill you and make them watch, I believed that. Right? And so let me back up a little bit. So 30 to 38, I think I was about 36 is when I had my first seizure from alcoholism. So I'm at the house, I'm running out of dope, right? Which is, at this point, like I'm equally doing the dope and the meth, right? And I'm running out of dope. I'm starting to get nervous. He's gone, right? I don't know how I'm going to get it. So I go to the liquor store, I get a bunch of alcohol, I come back. And so I kind of went on a bender. And by the time he gets back with it, I'm in a pretty bad place. And that was the very first day that I ever had a seizure. And I did it right in front of my son. And obviously I don't remember it. But my son, the way my son talks about it, right, is like he calls my parents, right, and I think that the issue, right, was my mom was so mortified that her daughter turned out this way, right, that a lot of it initially was like let's keep this under wraps, right, like let's not make this a them problem yet, right, let's try to figure out how to deal with it within the family, and so he calls my parents show up over there. And my son picks me up off the floor and takes me outside to my parents' car. And you know, the way my son explains it, because I don't recall, right, is that he handed his mom over to her parent. Like, it was so traumatizing, right? And that night, I'm in the hospital. They're trying to figure out what I'm doing. I'm now without alcohol or drugs, and there's this awareness that I'm trapped. Like, I cannot live without the use of this at all. So I'm at Loma Linda. My parents are there trying to figure out what the hell happened to their daughter. And I check myself out. I wait for my parents to go to the cafeteria, and I check myself out. I knew I couldn't go home because now the gig's up, right? My parents know it, you know, and so I show up at my apartment a couple days later, and my dad had taken my son over there, and went through my house, and like when I walked in the door, in my living room, there was a pile of Kessler bottles on the floor, and when I tell you there was hundreds, that's probably hundreds, right? And we're talking like handles, like liters, the big jugs from Stater Brothers. Like, there wasn't the teeny bottles. Like, there was not much shame in my game, right? But I was just too caught up that I couldn't even take him to the trash, right? And so I had him. And so I walk in, and there's this pile of alcohol. And my first thought was, is there any alcohol in there, right? Like, I can't process or deal with any of this. I'm not capable of that, right? I'm just not. I had been numbing my feelings for so long. And so in that moment, my son's like, this is it. I'm not doing this with you anymore, you know? And I'm 36. He's 13. And he says, Mom, you've got to make a decision. I can't live like this anymore. He found drugs, so now he knew when he went through my room. So now he knew Mom's alcohol problem isn't getting better. Mom's got a drug problem to mask her alcohol problem, right? So there's pipes and weed, and it just broke in my living room on the floor. And the only thing I could do is try to find a solid shard, right? Or something to make myself feel better, right? And so at that point, I got out of that apartment, and I went and lived with that dude because that's where it had taken me, right? Like, I had no means of money. I couldn't even fill out my fucking unemployment. Like, that shit was in the way of me using. And so it progressively gets worse. I'm having seizures if I don't drink. So I get hit by a big rig. I'm 38 years old. I get hit by a big rig. I get T-boned by a big rig. Okay. And
your fault or his?
It was hers, actually.
Oh,
she
hers.
ran a
Okay.
red light, right? I was absolutely under the influence, but she ran a red light. And thank God it wasn't a big impact, but it was big enough that it fucked me up, right? But I had to get off scene because I'm under the influence, right?
Did you drive away or run away?
So the cops show up. The beautiful thing for me was, first of all, I look like a soccer mom, right? And so, but second of all, she just got the truck off the lot, brand new. And she was off of her rocker, right? And so they were dealing with her, and they wanted me to go to the hospital. I'm like, I have a friend coming. They're going to pick me up. We're going to have the car towed. I'm going to go to the hospital later. As long as you're going to go. They were dealing with her. I got out of it, right? I wake up the next morning. I cannot fucking move. Like,
I was going to say, she was probably less fucked up than you.
100%, right? 100%. Like,
You
she
pulled it together, though.
impacted my passenger side so hard that it completely distorted my driver's side. Like, I could not get out the driver's side door, and she hit me on the passenger side. And so we go to the hospital. And in the midst of all of that, right, like, I land at the hospital, and I didn't know anything about a higher power or God. I didn't know anything about that in that part of my life, right? But I land in this hospital, and the doctor that happened to be on staff, his daughter's a heroin addict. Who just did a home invasion, who's on the run, and she's a baby, right? I'm 38 years old. I think at that point she was 20 or 21. She's on the run. He hasn't seen her, right? And here comes in this woman that he feels like, I didn't know it at the time. I found out later with what he shared with me, right? But he immediately starts, how can we help? I'm not hiding the fact that I do drugs. I'm telling, he's trying to give me these prescriptions, and I'm like, I've got a meth problem and an alcohol problem. I can't do anything else, right? And my friend's like, dude, fucking take it. We'll fucking sell that shit, right? And so
That's a good trade-off.
Here's the deal, right? This was a while ago, and so I left the hospital with fentanyl patches, with oxycodone. Like, I left there with a gang of shit, right? And but here was the ticket with him. He says, I got to take your blood work and I'll continue to give you the medication. And I was like, that's a deal, right? Because now I'm finding out, as he's whispering in my ear, how much this shit costs. Like, because I now have 3 different liquor stores in Redlands I have accounts at, right? So I'm hearing ching, ching, ching. I can fix these accounts, right? I can pay these accounts up because they're not going to stop selling to me. And so we leave, and he's like, dude, you got to do the blood work because we need this shit to sell it, right? So I go do the blood work, and so about 2 weeks later, I get a phone call from him saying, oh, I want to get you some more medicine. I need you to come in, right?
This is the doctor?
The doctor, but wait, right? So he says, I need somebody to drive for you. I said, okay. So I show up at Kaiser, right? Mm-hmm. And he comes in the room, and he's got this folder, and I've got my boy there who's not fucking talking to me. He's 15 years old. He cannot drive, right? I've made up these lies, right, that his mom's, oh man, I've been hit by this big rig, and this doctor just wants you to see, like, I'm allowed to have all these drugs because he's given them to me, right? And we get there, and I'm thinking I'm leaving with a sack of drugs. And he opens up my folder, and this is May of 2013. And he opens up my folder, and he says, you are dying of alcoholism. And if you keep this up, you're going to be dead by December.
Oh, wow.
And I'm not going to be giving you anything else. And I want to know how I can help you. And that is not what I wanted to hear, right? And so I left that hospital angry and pissed off because I had taken my boy there, and how fucking dare you? You're being intrusive. I'm a victim. One more time, I'm a victim, right?
Right.
And so we leave there, and the first thing I did was go to the liquor store. And my son was like, I fucking hate you. I will never talk to you again. You're fucking dead to me. And the truth is, right, is here I sit in this car, and I want to die so bad, but I want to be his mom so bad. And like I say it, man, if I'm given a choice, once I put one in me, I'll never choose my kids. I just can't. I fucking can't, man. It's not to say that every time I do this or do that, I just can't. Mm-hmm. And so I put him out of the car, and so I went home, and I looked in the mirror, and the whites of my eyes were glowing yellow, and I was fucked up. And so I decide, you know what, I'm going to detox. So I went into Kaiser. The plan was that I was going to detox for 3 days and then go home and get a game plan for my son. So now this is June. And so I go into Kaiser. I go into that detox. It took him 7 days to bring me out before I had a seizure.
Yep.
And I came out, and I left Kaiser with absolutely no tools, with nobody in my life that's clean or sober, right? And I went into this house of this guy that was a member of a local fellowship, right? Of a 12-step fellowship. And he said, you can stay here, but you have to go to meetings. And I'd never been to meetings before. I didn't even know what that was. I had no idea. Like, I was that sheltered in my life that when he talked about these meetings, I had no idea what he meant. And so actually, I'm just going to tell, this is the story, right? So he says, I'm going to take you to this meeting. But he doesn't really tell me exactly what it is yet, right? And so I'm thinking I'm going to go to this place to get narcotics and, like, anonymously, right? I think that I'm going to get drugs,
Anonymously.
right? And anonymously. So I go in, I'm wearing a white T-shirt, no bra, baby panties, like high heels, and I walk into this church, right? I walk into this church on San Bernardino, St. Paul, okay? And there's this guy at the podium, banging on the podium, talking about God, and I'm thinking, what the fuck is happening, right? And I walked out and I changed smoked and I said, I'm never doing that. And he says, if you live with me, that's what you have to do. You're not going to get drugs anonymously there, so you're going to have to go and sit through a meeting. And so I attended a couple, right? It was I was so devastated, right? It was just so devastating to me. I was ready for it too. And so I stayed in this dude's house and I did not leave because I did not trust myself, right? If he took me to a meeting, I went to a meeting and I came right back home. And at 59 days, this is a huge story, but I was at 59 days, that boyfriend that I had taken me against my will, and I was using again. And there was an incident that led to that. And
Did part of you want to go because you knew you would use?
No, it was completely against my will. Yes. And so and there was a really horrific things done in that process, right? And but what I didn't know was that my family had planned a party for me for my 60 days, and this is my 59th day.
Wow.
And so I'm going to tell you that they didn't care about the circumstances. They didn't. It was one more time. She's a liar, cheat, and a thief. And a whore, mostly, right? And so I ended up getting away from him, and I just dove so much deeper into it, right? And so I don't know exactly the incident. I recall pieces of it. So somehow my ex-husband let me pick up my daughter. So I pick up my daughter. She is, at this point, if my son's 15, she is 9. So I pick her up. I'm at this house. I come to with my daughter on the couch. I got no pants on. And I'm in the house with a couple men. And it was that moment where I didn't really know what happened. I didn't know. My daughter was there and she was sleeping. But I made a decision that day to go to treatment. And so I drive to my parents' house completely fucked up, right? I had no drugs, so it was a lot of alcohol at this point. And they were really upset, right? Like, you drove your daughter here like this. I mean, I was fucked up. And I happened to call a treatment center in San Bernardino, and they brought me. They said, "Come in today." I was not fucking prepared for that, right?
Yeah.
And so I hadn't showered in I don't know how long, and so the process of going to treatment is just a motherfucker, right? Like, it's the day you don't understand what I have to do to get ready, and so I had convinced my mom to stop because I had something I had to pick up at my friend's house.
Did she do it?
She did. God love my mom, right? And
I've had my mom do that too.
Oh, God love
She
that,
knew what I
right?
was doing.
Yeah, my mom had not a clue. Okay, so it's my mom in the front seat. I'm in the passenger. My sister's in the back seat. And so I'm coming up on this treatment center. I'm drinking whiskey, and I pull out. My mother has never seen a drug in her life, never. And I pull out. I had gotten meth, and I pull it out. I'm doing a gagger off of her dashboard, and she's screaming, "I'm gonna get a felony!" And my sister's beating me from behind, and I'm like, I just need to be fucked up. And my poor mom, right? And so I went to treatment, and I'm gonna tell you that the minute I got there, immediately I regretted it, right? But at this point, my boy isn't talking to me at all. I call, my mom's dead, and hangs up. And
Wow.
and I didn't even know what to expect, right? But I went in there so fucked up that I'm like, okay, maybe I could fight and fuck my way through here. Maybe I could get kicked out, and then again, I'm the victim, right? They can't be mad that they kicked me out, right? And so I go in there immediately trying to hook up with this chick. Like, I got cocaine in my butt, which I do not have in my butt. This bitch went and ratted on me, right? Yeah. And so
Was that like your pickup line?
that was my pickup line.
Nice.
It was not effective. So I spent like the first 6 days wrecking havoc, right? Get in the shower. I'm not fucking showering, right? Like, I'm so defiant. And so I get in there on a Sunday. So it's the following Saturday. And there's this thing going on in Redlands called Recovery Happens.
Been there.
And my son, and so my counselor comes into me and says, there's a possibility that your son's going to be there.
Wow.
You need to get in the shower, right? And so I get in the shower, and that was the first shower that I had since I'd been there. And I put on a little makeup, and we go down, and recovery happens, right? And the girls I'm with put a blanket down, and we're laughing and joking on the blanket, and I'm so happy. And I see my son pedaling off from the, pedaling over, and like he gets there, and he's like, I need you and one of your drug addict friends to come over here, right? And he pulls me over to the side, and he says to me, if my dad dies, I can say all these beautiful things about him.
Wow.
And if you die, I could say, well, she's kind of my homegirl, and he said, like, fucking bury yourself or live. Like, that's it. He was fucking done. And I'm going to keep my sister away from you too. It was that simple. Like, I'm going to keep her away. And that was I had a moment of clarity, right? Because I'm clean, right? I'm in a place where something can't happen. Like, I'm in treatment, right? And so I went back to that treatment center, man, and I did everything that they told me to do. Everything. And I, right before my completion, I ended up getting pneumonia, right? And so they told me I was a few days shy. Just go ahead and go home, get well. But, the things that happened in that treatment center when I cleared, like, myself out of the way, right, was like sponsorship, meetings, step work, service, right? And so I knew what I had to do when I got out there. I knew what I had to do. I wasn't sure if I was willing, but I knew I had the tools, right? So I get out. I'm well. I'm not well. I'm getting well over the next few days. I'm living at my mom and dad's, and like, my parents weren't sold on meetings. They kind of felt like it was a place that victims go. They weren't really sold on it. They thought, like, you might wear Nikes and drink Kool-Aid and die or something. They were really wigged out about it.
We do wear Nikes.
Yeah, I have Nikes on today.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid. But I did, right? I found some meetings, and I started going. But, like, I had an issue with women, right? And so I would listen to women, and I didn't trust them. There was a situation with my best friend, and I just couldn't trust women. Mm-hmm. And so, but I remembered as I was going to meetings and starting to get, my son was starting to talk to me. Like, I had to do what the program suggested, what my treatment center suggested I had to do, because things were starting to change. So I'd been at my parents' for a couple weeks. My mom decided she didn't want me to do meetings. And I knew I was going to use if I didn't, right? Because I had nobody in my life at this point that was clean or sober, right? Everybody I knew was using in some capacity.
Right.
And I knew I wasn't strong enough to do this on my own, right? And so I'm like, if I can't go to meetings, then I've got to leave. And if I leave, I'm going to use. And just so happened, my ex-husband showed up that day to say, hey, I broke up with my girlfriend, and I'm going to move you in with me. And not to be together, right? Like, I have my own room, and you can be a mom to the kids, right? And I could tell you, for 13 months, I stayed in the same fucking sweats, and I attended 3 meetings a day. And so I'm in this noon meeting of Narcotics Anonymous. Okay. And this guy comes walking in, right? And he talks about having 20 years in the penitentiary, but he knew what was on page 56 of the basic text. And I was like, I want him to be my sponsor.
Yeah.
And so we started doing work, right? And somewhere in that, I just wanted to get an A on the test, right? Because he knew everything. And I wanted to be the best. And so very quickly, the steps for me became about wanting him to go, good job.
Right.
And not purging what I needed to purge. So I'm living there. I've not gotten a job. I literally have stayed in the same sweats, it feels like, for 13 months, right? I'm doing 3 meetings a day. I've got 800 and some contacts in my phone. I feel like I am famous in an anonymous program, right? Like, I feel like I'm somebody. And I'm standing in this room that is not mine. It's my ex-husband's room. He's got these floor-to-ceiling mirrors, and my girlfriend calls and says, "Do you want to go roller skating?" And
Was she from the program?
She was not.
Oh, okay.
But she was what I would call somewhat normal. She did not have an issue with any of substances or anything. And like I kept stumbling over my words, right? Like roller skating. I don't know. Do I want to go roller skating, right? And she's like, "Dude, it's just a question." And I'm looking at myself in this mirror and I have no idea if I like to roller skate. So I have longer hair at that point, right? And I get off the phone with her, and I call, and I make a hair appointment. I'm gonna chop my hair off. I need to change my makeup. I know what and you know what? Those meetings are the problem. I've invested my soul into those meetings, and I don't even know who the fuck I am. That next morning, I got up. My appointment was at 10 a.m. Instead of going to the gas station to get a pack of cigarettes, I went to that liquor store that I had an account at, which I had not been in for 13 months. It wasn't a decision that I made. It's just where my car drove me, right? And I want to say it was like 9:47. It was right, the appointment. My hair was right down there. I remember looking at the clock and thinking, fuck, it's almost time for my appointment. And so I asked for a pack of Camels and a bottle of Kessler. And the guy behind the counter was like, "You don't drink that anymore." And I'm like, "Well," and then the kid behind me says, "Well, it's 5 o'clock somewhere." And there it was.
Yeah.
But the profound thing about that moment, right, is I get in the car, I put it beside me, right? I drive to the place, I get my hair cut, and the whole time I'm getting my hair cut, I'm thinking, I'm a boss bitch. Like, I'm not addicted anymore. Because I didn't pick that up and neck it yet, right? Like, you know what? This 13 months has done me some good. I bet that I can drink like a lady. And so this is what my head is doing while I'm getting a haircut. And before she's even done, I can't stop thinking about that bottle. And I have to fucking tell her, mind you, I have my purse on me. I left my debit card in the car. I have to go to the car real quick. I'm going to grab it and I'm going to come back in and pay you. So I could go out there and drink that bottle that I had felt like I had just became a woman and didn't have to neck it from a bottle, right?
And then he went out and necked it.
And I necked it, right? and there it was. And so I want to share this because it's profound for where my life is today, right? So I came into meetings and what I didn't know at the time was I was indifferent. Right, I put some alcohol in my mouth, a little bit up my butt, right, and put a little meth in my nose, right.
I had
to put alcohol in my butt because I was having seizures, and my esophagus was all fucked up.
Oh, normally it's the other way around.
I did meth up there too. I put a lot of things up there, but the alcohol was what I had to do to live, right? And so as I'm sitting in these meetings, right, I see these people walk in, and like, they do heroin, and I'm like, oh my God, there are people that do heroin, right? Because where I come from, like the meth community is far different than the heroin community, right? Yeah. And so I never really knew anybody that did heroin, and
they don't come outside.
They don't come outside, and so now I'm sitting with them in a meeting, and again, I'm like, I need to sit away from them because I don't want to catch what they have. And then people would come in and they're homeless. How the fuck are you homeless, right? Like, I didn't get that. But then the like IV users would come in and I'm like, oh my God, they have to have HIV. I am not sitting next to them, right? This was a process that was in my head that I never realized was a process until I realized it, right? So now I'm at my ex-husband's. I've now relapsed. He finds out I hadn't worked for 13 months. I got $1.17 in my pocket and he kicks me out of his house. It's in October. And so, remember, I had 800 and some contacts in my phone, right? But I hadn't formed a relationship with any of them. And so I had called that sponsor, and he's like, Tina, everybody fucking knows you're using. Nobody's going to let you in unless you're ready to stop. Well, I'd already put one in me, right? It was going to be on my terms. And I knew how to do it now, and that night was the first night I ever slept in my car. And it was so fucking cold. And what I didn't tell you, right, was I had lost everything. So I had this beater Volkswagen that my son had ran into. My ex-husband just pays for it instead of having it fixed. And that's my car. It doesn't have any air conditioner, no heater. It's all beat up. It's like, and it's a Beetle. And so it sounded like a tin can, right? And so I'm sleeping in that. I didn't get a blanket. I didn't get to take none of that shit. So fast forward, right? I'm out on this relapse for 3.5 years. And I talk about that attitude of indifference because it was profound in my life, right? When I'm sitting in the house directly across from that treatment center that I went to, shoving a needle in my arm for the first time, I wanted so bad to walk across the street and beg them for help, and I couldn't do it. The first time I put heroin in my body, I thought, oh God, I'm just gonna do a double. I'm gonna do a speedball. I'm not gonna fade out, you know? And everything I despised or was unsure or was unfamiliar, I became. You know? And like I was 87 pounds. I would sit in that little Volkswagen in San Bernardino and like I would feel the rig and pray to God, the only God that I knew, right? Which was only the convenient one, right? I would pray for him to take me, and he wouldn't take me, and I didn't understand why I wasn't even that good. Yeah. And you know, and then you get to the point in your life, right, where you have no money, and I'm standing in a parking lot of the 99-cent store in San Bernardino, and I'm negotiating the terms of sexual favors with a dude because I hadn't ate and I hadn't gotten high and I'm sick. And it's profound for me today because that moment was a big part of me broke, right? Like I'm like doing this sales pitch, right? Like I'm this used car salesman, right? Like I'm gonna just do the best job you've ever had, and like I just was really going for it. And he was like, "Okay, I'm gonna tell all my friends how much." And I was like, $10. And in that moment, I was like, "Dude, that's my worth. It's $10." And I had a bunch more moments, right? Like my kids now are not talking to me again, right? And so I'm in this relapse. I meet this guy, right? And there's a lot of addiction, and we're trying to get clean. We're trying to do this. And in the midst of all that, right? I landed this job, and I felt like a fake and a fraud, right? I'm fucked up, and but it's a construction company, so I go to work in the office. They're all fucked up. So it's like a win-win. They don't know. They think I'm a party girl. Like, it's okay. So there's this big fight between me and that boyfriend. And I'm somebody now, right? Because I got this job. So I go to this motel, which is really... I go to a hotel, which is really a Momo. But it says hotel on the sign, so I thought I had arrived, right? And so by this time now, I'm back on the alcohol. I've not done meth for about 9 months. Right, I'm just drinking. I'm that party girl, but all of my stuff is slowly starting to collapse in my life, right? Because I'm a drunk. Remember, I'm a binge drinker, and so my family falls by the wayside. My children, one more time, are just and so I'm at this motel, so I'm checking in, and I tell her, oh my God, I got a job. I can pay. I'm going to pay 1 week, right? I get paid weekly. Now I just got promoted at work to do payroll. Oh, God, if they only knew, right? So I did payroll on a Wednesday, and I got paid on a Thursday, right? And so I'm like, I got this. I'm going to just pay for this every week. And if you could just put me in the back. And she's like, absolutely. And so I'm driving my car loaded again with my possessions, right? And I go to back in, and the people in the room right next to me, their doors open, and I fucking know what's going on in there. Yeah. But that night, I'm back on meth, right? And one more time, I'm spiraled, right? So this part of my story is profound for me, and I have to remember it, so I'm going to recap it, right? So everybody in my life has given up on me, right? My mom is the epitome of boundaries. She will drive past me in the rain when I'm in a booty shirt and tube top and ask me if I want to get clean, and if I say no, she keeps driving. She don't give a fuck. You either want to be clean or you're not going to be in my life, right? my kids will put up boundaries, right? But my dad has been my steady, right? My mom would take his ATM card away so he couldn't give me money, and so he'd get a little coffee can and put change in there, and like he did anything necessary to make sure that I was alive. And so now I'm back on this run, right? I'm now been doing meth for, I don't know, a month and a half or whatever, and so I'm at work, and I get a call from my mom, and I know if she's calling me, something's going down because she's the epitome of boundaries. I don't answer it, send it to voicemail. What's up, Mom? So I'm living at this Momo in Redlands. I'm working in Rancho. I'm like, my mom and dad live in Grand Terrace, close to San Bernardino. I can get there. I can get closer to my connect, right? And she's like, you need to come here today. So my mom and dad's house, like the front of their house was here, like in the front. And then you'd go to a back alley, right? And that's where their garage was. That's where my dad always stayed. So I'm like, my plan is I'm going to dip in the alley, go in the garage, see what's up, and get the fuck out, right? And so I go in there. My dad's sitting at this desk. I'm sitting down trying to score a bag. And like my dad slides his chair over to me. And he puts his hand on my leg. And he grabs my face and he says, I'm dying of cancer. And I need you to be my daughter. I need you to get clean. Now, I'm going to tell you something profound, right? And that treatment center I went to in 2013, like as a family, we made a pact that Tina would never promise because I was a liar, right? So now it's 2018. And he grabs my face and he's got these big crystal blue eyes and he's looking at me in the fucking soul. And he says, promise me you're never going to use again. I need you. I have never asked you for anything, but I need you to be my daughter. And I looked at him in the eyes and I said, I promise you, with no fucking intention on keeping that promise. I didn't know how I was going to do that, right? But I can tell you, again, this God or this higher power, whatever the belief is, you know, for the people listening, right, is I get in my car and I drive 110 miles an hour back to the hotel. And I pull in the back, and now my hotel room door is open, and everybody's in there partying, right? And I don't know what happened except divine intervention, right? I get out of my car, and I thank God I was in the back because I started putting everybody and everything out, and I locked the door, and I started to cry, and I crawled into bed, and I didn't know how I was going to do it. You know, how am I going to get clean? I can't stay clean because it's too hot or it's too cold outside, or my shoelace broke, or you know, whatever. And so my clean date's 11/5/2018.
Nice.
And
you didn't use after that?
I did not.
That's amazing, dude.
I did not.
That's crazy.
I didn't. And I went to a meeting the next morning, and like I begged people in that meeting for help, and so, you know, the very first sponsor that I got back when I got back this time, she had tattoos on her face and she was super thuggy and she was trying to fight people in meetings, but she had 10 years clean. And so I'm like, I'm going to have this bitch sponsor me. Like, we could get down. This is going to be so fun. Like, this is the experience I wanted, right? And so I liked her because she was fucking mouthy and she would tell people what the fucking meetings. And that was my get down. That's what I had just came from, right? And as it got closer to my dad dying, I knew that she was going to allow me to stay sick. And so I just started to pray. I didn't have a God or a higher power or none of that shit at that point, but I just started to pray because I knew that if I was going to stay clean, I needed something drastic. And so on 4/20/2019, I was 5 months clean. My dad passed away. And it was such a strange moment, right? Like, I'm in there with the family, and like I get the opportunity to be at his face when he took his last breath. And my dad had a really long beard and really long hair, and like I got to brush his hair and his beard, and like I remember having a fleeting thought, right? I walked out of the room, and I thought, like, where am I going to use dope in this motherfucking place, right? But everybody was there. Motherfuckers were in the bathroom. They were in the garage. Like, they were everywhere, right? And so the first call I made was to a member of the fellowship. And I said, my dad died, and I don't know how to do this, man. You know, when I got here this time at 43, I didn't have a friend. I didn't have a pot to piss in. I didn't have, I had burned through my life so bad. I was 87 pounds. I was willing to do anything for the next one. And these people started to show up. And they were pissing me the fuck off because I wasn't ready for that, right? Like, I asked you to pick me up one time. I don't want you bringing food here, right? And they did. And they wouldn't stop coming, right? Food on the porch. It's just, it was so fucking much because it was not something I was used to, right? And I just want to share a little bit more about recovery, right? Because so my dad passes, and I immediately know that I need to get somebody, number one, that could handle me, right? And number two, that has something that I want, right? And so I had prayed, and I went into this meeting. It was right after my dad passed away. And I don't know what, this is my experience. This lady started to share. I felt like the clouds opened. I felt like Jesus came down and was like, this is the one, you know. I didn't even know who Jesus was, right? But I felt like that. And I ran up to her after the meeting, and I almost proposed to her. I said, I'm grabbing her hand. Like, she was absolutely petrified, right? And like, we started doing the deal. And here's the thing, is she knew me from before, when I was in the rooms before. And so there was no fucking around. She knew who I was. And so I started following her lead, right? I didn't know when to laugh at things, right? Like, if people talked about assholes and about putting stuff in their butt and about crazy ass sex shit, that shit was funny to me, right? But when people would have a normal conversation and talk about, oh my God, my kids did this, ha ha ha, I'm like, I had just had such a distorted perception of reality at that point that, like, I just had to mimic what she did, right? And so anyways, we worked those steps, and my life started to change without my permission, right? And I don't understand it, and I don't fully know even how to explain it. And so that was in 2018, right? My dad dies in 19, and you know, like, recovery for me has been a thing where, like, I'm so grateful that things are revealed for me when they are, right? Because I've said, like, I have this super fucking volatile relationship with my mother my whole life, right? And so in May of 2021, there's an incident where I end up not having a place to live. And so I'm sitting in front of this liquor store, and I don't know if I want to fucking do it. I'm like 2 years, 7 months clean. I don't fucking know if I want to stay clean or not. There's just too much happening. There's just been a series of events of things that have happened, right? And I'm a little bit on the pity pot, like, woe is me, right? And so my sponsee tries to call, and I try to fucking ignore her call, and I answered it. And I was so fucking pissed, right? I'm in this parking lot, I'm crying, I'm in Yucaipa, I'm gonna drink. I just am gonna tell you that I'm gonna drink, and I'm not asking your permission. And she says, Tina, go to your mom's. And that had never occurred to me, right? I've never really been to my mom's. Like, my dad dies, he was my person. I don't really keep this relationship with her. I show up for holidays, and that's about it. And so I'm sitting in this, I told her, absolutely not, you know, and I get off the phone, and I know my mom's got to work the next morning, and I'm having this thing, and I'm sitting in this parking lot. Okay, am I going to use again, or am I just going to go to my mom's house? And so I show up at my mom's doorstep. I knock on the door. I have a broken arm, a broken hand, and I said, like, I need your help. And the most beautiful thing about that, right, is I didn't know that that's what my mom has been waiting for her whole life, right? It's just her daughter to need her, right? Because I'm this independent, pain in the ass little rebel that runs around. I don't fucking need you. You know, you're fucking problematic. You're the problem. And but what had happened by the time I had land there was I was working some steps and I was working with girls. And I had this sponsor that I trusted and I loved, right? And so my mom immediately, man, starts cutting up my meat and like because I can't do it, I have a broken hand, running me bass and shit, right? And I'm gonna tell you one of the most profound moments, right? Was my mom is volatile, she just was, and so I had just bought a whole bunch of Victoria's Secret thong underwear, right? And so I go and I'm in the room and she gets me out of the shower and I'm gonna put these motherfuckers on and I go to put them on and they go all the way up to my boobs. I'm like, what? My mom cut the crotch out of all of them, right? I wanted to beat the brakes off this bitch, right? But because of the program that I work,
Right.
she said only loose girls wear those. And in that moment, like I just got to be her daughter, right? And I'm going to tell you what I didn't know when I moved into her house May of 2021 was that in July of 21, she was going to suddenly pass away. I had no idea. We had no idea. And so I ended up staying there, and I'm going to tell you that my mom remained the same person that she was, but I didn't. And we never fought, and I gave her this beautiful gift of having her daughter there. And so on a Sunday in July, she said she wasn't feeling well. We thought it was COVID. She had scoliosis, which was kind of pushing back on her lungs. And I took her to the hospital. And that was on a Sunday. And on a Tuesday, we found out she was full of cancer. And on that next Sunday, she passed away. So 7 days, she passed away. And so, you know, and 3 months before that, and my employee got smashed on a job on one of our job sites between a boom, got smashed in a building, and he was 28 years old, and so again, here I am, like, what the fuck is happening? Like, life is lifing, and it's doing it, and I don't want it to, and but really, the rainbow and all that, right, was that I got to be my mom's daughter for her too. You know, and so what the things that recovery has given me, right, is I got to walk both of my parents home, both of them home, and not use. And so, like, I feel super honored to do this, right? I know I've been talking for a super long time, but when I got here, like, I got here on a promise that I never thought was ever going to stay, right? I never thought, the truth is, I thought my dad was going to die really quick and then I could go use. And what happened was in that 5 months, I became vested in something that was bigger than me that I didn't understand at the time, right? And I'm going to tell you that, like, there's so many things that I can say about recovery and 12-step meetings. Like, without them, there would be no me, right? But I have to share this because it's profound for my life. I work steps. I'm a sponsor, right? I have girls. I'm of service at meetings when I can be, right? I've got a lot going on in my life right now, but for the longest time in my recovery, right, I did that. But I'm going to tell you that, like, I surround myself with people that won't let me fall.
Right.
Right, that won't fucking let me fall. That when my parents pass away, they show up by the boatloads. Yeah. And they lay in bed with me if I have to, and they get me up and put me in the shower if that's what we have to do. Like, I don't want to say I think bad of me today, because I have a pretty good image of myself today, which is I never thought was possible, right? But the people I hang around with are very spiritually fit and very good people, and I try to put very good people in my life. Because I heard one time in a meeting, right, like, you're the sum of the 5 people you hang around.
Facts.
And in that moment in my life, I was like, fuck, no wonder I'm an asshole. I'm hanging around with newcomers that are running amok, right? And so the 5 people that I have in my life today are so fucking strong that I couldn't fall even if I wanted to. They wouldn't let me. And so not that I don't believe in all the stuff that meetings come with, because I do. Like, without that, but I'm going to tell you, without my sponsees, there truly would be no me. Right? I'm going to tell you that I was a mom that would say I wouldn't use over my kids, but I did that. Right? But for me today, the idea of calling my girls that I have put so much into, and tell them, like, man, I'm going to go out. Everything I fed you is bullshit. I'm going to go out. I can't fucking bring myself to ever do that. And so, I don't know. I dig this opportunity. I really appreciate you guys.
You killed it, Tina.
Yeah.
Oh,
And I want to say, I feel like that's looked over a lot, right? Because like the power of people, like the ultimate weapon, right?
100%.
Like even if you're like a strictly God person, like all through any religious text, right? There's people that carry the message of God, right? And so like, for me, like if it wasn't for the people, right, that told me to get into the books, that told me what to write down,
100%.
right, I wouldn't be who I am today, right? And there is no hierarchy in 12-step fellowships, right? There is no big I's and little U's, right? There is no like, I got this many years and you got that many years, so that means you're supposed to reach out to me.
Right.
You know, for me, it's like it was a profound moment, right, when I walked through my 12 steps, right, when I was guided through my 12 steps. And there was a lot of profound, life-changing moments in that process, right? But there's just something to be said about, like, walking somebody else, right? Because, like, my sponsor would always tell me, like, you're doing much better than what you feel, right? And now, like, I get to see, like, guys that are, like, fucking going crazy in their head, right? And like everything's so fucking horrible. I'm like, bro, you're doing a lot better than you feel right now, right? Like it's funny because they'll call me and they'll be going through shit and I'll laugh at them. I'm like, bro, you're right where you're supposed to be. You know, it's fucked up, but it's true, right? Because like there are some like people think that recovery is like this process is just it's all beauty, right? And it's so like freeing and it's so like, but like I'm gonna speak for me, right? I've been hiding and ducking like my whole life, right? And so like I get clean, and when I start to like reopen those doors, right, and start like undoing those fucking those filing cabinets and looking at like all the shit, like that shit's uncomfortable, bro. Like when I invited God to ask me to help him with my character defects and my shortcomings, that shit's uncomfortable, right? When I have to talk about like the trials, the molestation, the abuse, the dirty socks in my mouth and being thrown in the closet, like that's fucking uncomfortable, bro. Like when I have to talk about like sleeping with all these women and thinking that it was like something cool because I'm a fucking guy, right? But not knowing that I'm devaluing myself and not really living up to my worth because all I fucking could find value in is sleeping with a woman. Like all that shit's uncomfortable, right? When I talk about like the anger and hatred I had towards everybody, like none of that shit fucking feels good, right? It's not supposed to feel good. It's supposed to suck, right? It's supposed to hurt a little bit. It's supposed to fucking, but once you get through all that, the freedom of feeling that shit is important, right? But like the last few years, man, I would definitely say the last year, right, when I lost my mom, right, the first people I called were my sponsors, right, and my now girlfriend, right? But those were the first people I called before I even called my sponsor, right? Was my sponsor called? Absolutely, but it's the guys that I like build relationship with, right? And like I remember early on in recovery, my sponsor would call me, right, and he would tell me his bullshit, and I would think to myself like, what the fuck is going on here, bro? Like, I'm trying not to, like, get loaded. Like, I'm trying not to hurt somebody today, right? Like, I'm trying not to fucking, like, kick somebody's fucking door in. And those were real things that I was going through in early recovery, like, dealing with the mother of my kids and all that household and, like, wanting to, like, prove my dominance. Don't you know who the fuck I am? Like, I'm doing my best not to hurt somebody, and you're calling me about your fucking car problem, right? But what I understand today is he was teaching me something. Right? He was teaching me that like not everybody leans on one person, right? We all lean on one another, right? And like when my ass is falling off or when I act out in bad behaviors, right? And I'm not living as spiritual as I think I should, right? I get to fucking call people, right? When fucking like for me, a big thing is like when I have problems with my kids, right? I will automatically revert to you're such a horrible dad. right? You're not doing a good enough job. You need to be doing better, right? And I need counsel through that, right? I need people to talk to, right? They could remind me, Adam, you're a single dad. You work full time. Like you got all this stuff going on. Like at the end of the day, you're doing the best you can with what you have, right? And just that little reminder, just people saying that, right? And I don't need people to boost me up and tell me how that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about someone who like brings me back down to reality. You know, you're right. I have a lot on my plate. It's hard. It's stressful. Like it's a 2-person job, and that's even hard when it's 2 people fucking doing it. You know what I'm saying? And I need people to like put me in check and put me back into my reality. And the truth is, you know, when I got here, my sponsor was the only person that really knew me and knew all the fucking scandalous things I'd done and how dirty I really got down when I was loaded, right? Because I share certain shit, but there's certain shit that I will not share in a meeting, right? But the other people that hold my secrets, that aren't really secrets anymore because a lot of them know, right, are my sponsees. And I get to lean on them, and what an honor and a privilege it is. Like, I'll end with this, like, I remember when I first got a house, right, in the mountain, not own, rent. I don't want to sound like I'm trying to be cool, you know. I ran a house, right, but it was my first place by myself. Just got full custody of my kids, right, and I went on Facebook, and I was like, hey, like, I just got this place. Like, we're starting from scratch. I don't have no plates, no cups, no pans, no fucking pillow. Like, I don't got nothing, right? And I want to tell you, man, like, in that fucking, that post, it was all of the fellowship. Right? And this isn't like a discredit to any of my family because I love them and they've always been there for me. But my mom, I remember talking to my mom, right? And my mom telling me, like, Adam, you have such amazing friends. Like, I looked at that post and I seen that it was just all your friends, right? And so for me, it's like, these are the people that gave me life, right? These are the people that, like, continue to give me life and continue to give me purpose. And so, like, you know, for anybody who's listening, man, like, if you're out there alone, you don't have to be. Right? If you feel like you're in this fucking fight by yourself and there's nobody's going to be right there, like, you don't have to be. Like there are free rooms available right now. You know what I'm saying? They will welcome you in, you know what I'm saying? And do their best to fucking love you back to life, you know? And there's a lot of fucking power in that. A lot of power.
Yeah, I didn't know it until I experienced it.
Yeah.
You know, it's crazy. And the truth is, sponsees, right? Like, they sponsor me just as much as I sponsor them.
For sure.
You know? Without them, there would be no me, and that's how it is. So.
Yeah. Mike's one of my sponsors for sure.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And I laugh when you act out too.
I don't laugh when he acts out though.
Sometimes.
Only one time I haven't laughed. Only one time. We ain't gonna talk about that right now.
Yeah.
Only one time I was like, bro, you better get your shit together if you're gonna fucking die, bro. Yeah. But so before we close the podcast, I mean, you kind of already shared it, right? I was gonna ask you, like, what is the most impactful, you know, thing in your recovery, the most important thing, right? Which is fellowship and people, right, in the program that could love you back to life. Obviously, recovery is a lot deeper than that, right? We got to do some work on ourselves. We got to do all that, right? But it starts with the people. If you could give one message to anybody who's listening to this podcast right now, what would you say?
Man, just one. Oh, this. I feel like there's so much pressure here. Just one thing. I oh man.
Give a couple.
You know, I think the biggest thing is, right, is like, I never knew life was going to be like this, right? One thing that was profound was early on in my recovery, I'm in a meeting and I'm thumping on the table that I just want to be happy. And why am I not happy, right? And there's this member of our fellowship, and he said, I want you to go home and I want you to look up joy and I want you to look up happiness and see which one you want. And I thought, oh, they're probably both the same. Well, they're both the same, aren't they, right? And so I went home, and joy is an internal thing and happiness is an external thing. And I'm going to tell you that as hard as it's been, I mean, I've had how many permission slips to use, and I'm living truly the best life that I have to live. And I think the key note, right, is you don't have to fucking do it alone. At 43, I was so fucking alone. And I've created friendships, like my mom and dad are gone, right? My fellow members are my family through and through, you know, like I will never do without, like the house and getting what you need. I will never do without with the family that I have here. And I didn't believe it until it happened to me. But I would say, right, like get in the herd, get in the middle, like let us love on you. Open your mouth. Like people didn't know I was hurting until I opened my mouth. Right. And I don't know. I believe in this thing so much that I think if you go somewhere and you need to be loved on and you're not, please try again and go to another one, right?
Yep.
Because I've found magic in 12-step meetings. I have found magic in there. Yeah.
Yep. All right, well,
Thank you, Tina.
That was
guys.
absolutely amazing.
Thanks.
We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
Staring at this man in the mirror, I see him often here. Wipe my tears. Only if you knew what I was going through. Only if you walked it in my shoes.
Looking at the skylight, thinking of my life like looking for the right state of mind to get my time right. I just hope my time's right. Lost up in the limelight, but you'll never know unless you walked up in my shoes.
As someone who struggled with addiction in the past, how does it feel to be able to give hope to others who are still struggling now?
You know, it's such an honor to be able to hear other people's experiences of life, to see how when faced with the very thing that was sent to destroy you, kill you and take you out forever didn't, but rather you have been given a second chance to give hope and be a light for those who are still in the dark. So don't be afraid to share your message to the world. You never know whose life you might be saving.